I didn't know what to do for this month. I tended to plan my videos a couple months ahead of time, and for March I just had no plans, thinking I was going to eventually come up with something, but I didn't, and it's March, and I really wanted to keep my promise that I was going to update at least once a month, so pretty much all of my February reads I finished the first week in March, so I'm going to tack them on to my March wrap up instead of doing a February wrap up. So instead, I figured I would do my did not finish list. I don't usually not finish a book, even if I really don't like the book, I still try to power through it anyway. I just don't like having an unfinished book hanging over my head. So a lot of these aren't going to be very recent examples. I decided to do this by going through my bookshelf and picking out what books I had started at some point in my life, but for whatever reason, I just never finished. The only recent within the past year example I have is The Ticket That Exploded by William Burroughs. I was given the warning with this book that this was a tough introduction to William Burroughs. He has a very distinctive style he writes with. Initially, that really made me interested in his work. I know he's considered a classic sci-fi writer, so I wanted to experience it just to better myself. And usually when a book is written kind of in a strange style, I find it very inspiring, even though I might not completely copy the style for myself. He uses a writing style called cut-up style. So what that's like is almost like a collage of words and sentences and concepts all cut up and pasted together. I'd say about one chapter into this book. It wasn't so much the cut up style that was disarming to me, it's his actual writing style. He kind of writes very poetically but in prose form, and the thing that really threw me off is that he just doesn't seem to like to use periods. So sentences will often be a paragraph long with no real division within it. And that's what made it difficult for me. While reading it, I had to insert my own stops within my mind, and it really just slowed down my reading process. Reading this was like walking through quicksand. And I don't mean that as an insult. I still really want to read this book. I'm just kind of putting it aside for now, and I think I'm going to try to read something else by Burroughs first to kind of familiarize myself with his style and hopefully make reading this a little bit more easier when I come back to it. Going back to a few years ago, I've mentioned before on this channel that I went through a reading slump at one point in my life, and one of the books I picked up hoping that it would spark my love for reading again was Dishonored's Return of Daud. This is obviously a video game tie-in novel, which this is my first and only video game tie-in novel I've ever read and probably ever will read. I should have taken advice from my friends who have read tie-in novels that they are not usually very good. That being said, if I ever get the chance to publish one, absolutely hit me up. I will write a video game tie-in novel if you want me to, as long as it's a game I really like. I thought this one might be different because I absolutely love Dishonored, and not even that, Dishonored's the only game I've played that I felt so attached to the canon characters that I would want to read more about them. Particularly knowing that this one is about Daud, and Daud is one of my favorite characters next to Billy Lurk, who unfortunately I knew wasn't going to be in this novel. The second game in the Dishonored series takes place 15 years later than the first one, and near the end of the first Dishonored game, Daud purposely fades to obscurity and kind of just goes off and does his own thing and hides from society for the 15 years between the two games, and then he comes back in the DLC, Death of the Outsider. So there's this huge span of time where we don't really know what Daud was doing. And that's kind of what my interest in this novel was. Some other Dishonored fans posted about it on social media, and the things they were saying suggested that this novel was going to fill in that 15-year gap a little bit more. And once I picked it up, I quickly discovered that all those 15 years was pretty much condensed into one-page explanation, which was kind of disappointing. It tried to follow kind of the action of the games, but it just didn't hit right for me. And I didn't quite like how they portrayed Daud either. I feel like I would rather just read fan fiction than read this novel, so I got maybe a third of the way there. And my bookmark that I used for this was actually a little sketch of Delilah that I did on a receipt from my place of employment at the time. Going back to college, I bought an anthology of the Grimm's fairy tales. I didn't get super far into it, that's about as far as I got. I was a lot more interested in this book in college because I was writing a paper on Anne Sexton, and she did a poetry anthology called Transformations, which was like feminist retellings of Grimm's fairy tales. So I had an interest to read the original fairy tales as well to compare and contrast. Once I finished the paper, my interest in the fairy tales kind of just dwindled away, and even now I really don't have interest in reading them. So I don't think I'm gonna finish this one either. And then going back to high school, I have The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. And if you notice, the bookmark I used is a dollar bill. And I use that as motivation for me to finish this book. The deal I made with myself is that once I finish reading this book, I can have the dollar bill. I made it about 10 chapters, actually literally 10 chapters, because it says chapter 10 right there, into the book. I definitely have a lot of respect for the concept of this book and what it achieved for health standards for the working American. But why I didn't finish it, I remember this was actually for history class. I actually really liked reading assignments in high school, but this one kind of just got to me after a bit. It wasn't so much the content, it was more like, I think like the pacing of how the class wanted us to read it. It was like 5 chapters, like a night. So I very quickly fell behind. Because not only was I taking this history class that I was supposed to read this book in, I was also in English class and reading books for that. It was also my junior year of high school, so there was a lot of like college prep stuff I was doing. So I just remember the workload kind of just got to me, and I ultimately decided it would have been better just to SparkNote each chapter instead of reading it, and that's what I did. I SparkNoted the rest of the book, and it's significant because that's the first time I actually did that in school, because I generally liked reading assignments otherwise. The only other reading assignment I did that for in high school was for Hamlet, which was in senior year, and at that point I was in a AP class, so a college level class of English, and we had already taken the final exam for that class, and so it was kind of just a thing to give us something to do in class, was to read Hamlet, and I just don't like Shakespeare. Again, I have a lot of respect for like what he's accomplished and how he's impacted society, but like I just can't read Shakespeare or like watch it. It just, for some reason, just doesn't connect with me. And again, like this was past the final exam, so like my brain was checked out. I just didn't care anymore. I already got my final grade in the class. I already passed it, so I wasn't gonna read Shakespeare when I didn't like Shakespeare. I just SparkNoted it. And the last one, going back to elementary school, is Hatchin' Magic by Anne Downer. I remember I got this at a book fair, which was some of my favorite childhood memories was at the book fairs. And I was so excited about this novel too. It just seemed so awesome to me. But for whatever reason, I had a really hard time with it. I kind of flipped through it a little bit, and I think maybe it was just like unusual names and unusual terms for things that was just a little bit over my reading level at the time. But I got about a fourth of the way through, and at that point I just decided I wasn't really enjoying this, so I wasn't going to finish it, and it's sat on my bookshelf since. I got brand new and it's starting to brown. I've had it for so long and I've been hanging on to it because a part of me really does want to actually read it. I love asking people about their favorite books from childhood, and that might be a future video of where I just talk about my favorite books from childhood. And this was actually my best friend's favorite book, so I kind of want to read it just because of that. Even though it's way underneath my reading level right now, I am reading the Animar series right now, which is a child series, but I've been enjoying that, and I think, as a fun little treat, I might actually read Hatchin' Magic. Thanks for watching my video. Let me know in the comments some of the reasons you have DNF'd a book in the past. And have you ever regretted not finishing a book before? Because obviously I have.